Usually, when you hear the words taking liberties, what just happened or is about to happen is not going to be good. Usually. But sometimes it just means you're changing things up from the norm on this particular occasion, putting a different spin on it, if you will. Not trying to make waves or dump tradition on its head, just a different version. My pal Andy knows what I'm talking about. So I thought I would switch up my intro and do something different by way of a video birthday card for Ed Mickelson. My intro started out normal, then turned into my version of a haiku. And since I'm not Japanese, and so as not to offend anybody in this day and age, I'm going to say this is a poem instead of a haiku. I just don't want to be accused of cultural appropriation.
Hey, so let's go. He received
a college scholarship in football, but wanted one in basketball, and wound up getting one in baseball. He was best in football, but he really wanted to play basketball, and ended up playing baseball. At first, he didn't play much baseball. Ed would soon be one who played in 18 major league games and got 3 hits. His first hit was off a Hall of Famer. His last put him in the history books. He would fulfill a childhood dream when he got to play in Yankee Stadium and said playing on the same team as Satchel Paige, Stan Musial, and Ernie Banks was a real highlight. Who got to do these things? Edward Allen Mickelson, nicknamed Mick. First base, MLB debut 1950. Born on this day 97 years ago. Happy birthday, Ed. Hope to find you happy and healthy on this day. You have some fans over here on the West Coast who would like to wish you a happy birthday, like my dad, who saw you play a few times over the years at Seal Stadium, and when I mentioned your name a couple of days ago, he said, "Oh, Beaver's first baseman." Your signature in the thumbnail is on his 1956 Seal scorebook that you signed for him. I hear you are a standout athlete, really good in basketball, and scored lots of touchdowns in your high school football team in St. Louis, where you guys didn't even have a baseball team until your senior year. That's when you caught the eye of a Cardinal scout. But with only a few games under your belt, they passed. But you were so good in football that the University of Tennessee offered you a scholarship. But you chose to attend the University of Missouri because it was closer to home. And as a freshman, you were a starter on both varsity football and basketball teams. You're just being humble when you say this is only because so many players were serving in the military. That is true, Mr. Mickelson. Yet all said and done, they say at 6'3", 200 plus pounds, that you are definitely a great all-around athlete. Ed enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1944 and spent 18 months on a base in Illinois playing basketball and baseball. Discharged in 1946, he would attend Oklahoma A&M, where he wanted to play basketball for future Hall of Fame coach Frank Abba, who had no more basketball scholarships to give. But Coach Iba pulled some strings and got Ed one in baseball. Ed was really good on the basketball team. Can't say that about Ed's play on the A&M baseball team. He went 1 for 23 at the plate. But he looked great in batting practice. And some of his hits in BP were so impressive that he got a tryout with the St. Louis Cardinals, who signed Ed for $2,000 in 1947. It pretty much comes down to this. Ed played 15 games in high school and 15 more in college. This meant he had to learn how to play baseball on the job. Got married in 1948 and continued going to college, now at Washington University in St. Louis. The Redbirds would promote Ed to the Pocatello Cardinals, Class C, and he would be named an All-Star. Ed Mickelson used a 35-inch, 35-ounce bat that he held high with his back elbow tucked tight to his body, giving him a short stroke, allowing him to hit in any direction, and would say a little prayer in the on-deck circle. Not a deeply religious man, yet carried a Bible with him everywhere, saying he felt more comfortable connected to a higher power. Mick bounced around the minors for a while, learning the game, before being called up to the majors by the Cardinals in September 1950. So it's Ed's first bat in the bigs, and he's facing the New York Giants at the, even back then, storied Polo Grounds. He's put in the game to pinch it with the bases loaded, and Ed starts to make that once-in-a-lifetime walk up to the plate for the first time as a big leaguer, and he proceeds to strike out, batter looking. His first big league start would come in place of a 6 Stan Musial. It's your first start in the majors, and you will be facing Boston Braves' Warren Spahn. Ed got a hit off Spahn, one of his 3 hits in the majors. Ed said his only regret is that he didn't hit better in the bigs. But he knew the importance of an education, and for a few seasons would arrive late to spring training camp in order to finish the school semester. When Ed arrived at camp in 1951, the Cards had no room in their system, so he was loaned out to the New Orleans Pelicans, a Pittsburgh Pirates affiliate. Playing on a sloppy field, Ed tore ankle tendons and was done for the season. Now it's 1952, and Ed is a college graduate and reported to camp on time. He was doing good in AAA Rochester, but lost playing time at first base because Big Steve Bilko hit better. Here's some insight into Ed. When Rochester general manager told Ed he was being sent down to AA, story goes, Ed got really mad and started to cry and banged his fist on the desk, refusing to be sent down. He wasn't, but he was 3 weeks later and didn't fight it. At the end of the season, Ed was tired of being bounced around leagues and set up a meeting with the Cardinals vice president. A little more insight into Ed's temperament. The meeting went from civil to combative quickly, and Ed demanded a trade. He was put on waivers and picked up by St. Louis Browns owner, Sports Shirt Bill Veeck, at the recommendation of manager Marty Marion, who knew Ed. At the Browns' 1953 spring training camp, they found a stress fracture in his foot, and he was sent down to AA to rest for most of the season. But Ed would be called back up to the big show late in September by the Browns to play in the last 7 games of the season, including the last game in franchise history. Ed Mickelson was the first pick in the 1954 minor league draft out of 8,500 players. Ed is proud of that. He was taken by the Portland Beavers, and in 1955, Ed set 2 Pacific Coast League records for a first baseman. He recorded 704 chances without an error and had a .996 fielding percentage. After the 1956 season, Mick went down south to play winter ball in Venezuela, making $1,000 a month. It would be his last time going down there. He said it was scary in many ways. Planes, cars, cab rides, people, angry fans. Ed's final games in the majors came with the Chicago Cubs early in 1957 before being sent back down to Portland, where Ed was selected a PCL All-Star for the 4th time. Ed said he liked playing in the PCL. The pay and the conditions were good. But out of the blue, in the middle of the season, he cleaned out his locker, packed up all his possessions, and went home to St. Louis. Ed would later be diagnosed with depression and anxiety. After considering suicide, he got help, got better, and to this day, I'm pretty sure Ed is helping out those who need help. The Mickelsons adopted 2 kids, and besides those kids, the guy they call Mick would now be called Mr. Mickelson, and would teach and coach countless kids for decades at his old high school. And even in retirement, Ed would coach kids at the local Jewish community center. Ed Mickelson is one of 4 big leaguers to write his biography without a ghostwriter. That's because he's smart and got a college education and didn't need a ghostwriter. In regards to his depression, Ed said, "You can't do it all by yourself." I saw a recent video of Ed being interviewed. He was recalling the moment in his basement when he was contemplating hanging himself. And you can see the wheels turning in his head, and it showed in his face as he was reliving that moment. And then it hit him how close he was. And then he started to tear up. Sad, in a way, inspirational. Ed's other advice? 1 foot in front of the other, keep going forward. Tomorrow's another day. That's great advice. But with some mental illness, you gotta have medication. This is what Ed said about that final St. Louis Browns game in franchise history. Quote, "I had become a trivia question. Who drove in the last St. Louis Browns run?" Now let's go back a few hours before Ed turned himself into that trivia question on September 27, 1953. And let's catch a ride with the Chicago White Sox as they head over to Sportsman Park in St. Louis, Missouri to play the Browns. There was just over 3,000 baseball fans attending this historic final game in St. Louis Browns history. Fast forward to the bottom of the 9th. The game is tied. There's 2 away. Browns right fielder Jim Pisoni steps up to the plate with a chance to win the game, become an instant hero and a Brownie legend. Instead, he grounds out for the 4th time in the game. So now we go to extra innings, and the fans are asked to throw back in foul balls. It's the last game of the season, and they're running out of game balls. Minnie Minoso will hit a double for the White Sox, knocking in the go-ahead run. Now we're in the bottom of the 11th, and it's Ed Mickelson's turn to be the hero for the Browns. He already made what turned out to be history in the 3rd inning by getting a hit and an RBI. But White Sox pitcher Billy Pierce is having a real nice game, and he already struck out Ed twice, and he would again. Ed's big league career didn't turn out like he wanted, like so many others, but Ed Mickelson will go down in MLB history as a starting first baseman in the last game in St. Louis Browns franchise history, and getting the last hit and knocking in the last run. But as the Browns motto goes, first in shoes, first in booze, and last in the AL. Those words never rang more true because with 100 losses, that's exactly how the final season in franchise history ended for the Browns, in last place. Now, normally that would have been the end of my show, but today's intro and outro were different because it's the man of the day, Mr. Ed Mickelson's birthday. And I would just like to say that sometimes being last is not so bad. And you're first in my book for not giving up, Mr. Mickelson. Happy birthday.